Everyone hear me? Huh? Okay. So do you want to start with the welcome?
Oh, yeah.
I'll make sure the other speakers.
Everybody gets up there. We have You're supposed to get me started with my virtual tour, so I don't want to speak until he's back.
Okay.
You'll come back. Sorry. No, I'll sign that one. Yeah. I ran the pointers there.
So,
Monday I was working at the Brooklyn restaurant and I left. They had just been bullets
all right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Lesley University. I'm David Morimoto. I direct the Natural Sciences and Mathematics Division. I'm just going to welcome you and then hand it over to our moderator, Dr. Amy Myrtle. But this has been a concerted effort, a collaborative effort of several different people and from several different organizations, and to refocus our attention on a crucial local issue of conservation, and to try to have this forum result in positive, tangible action items. So I don't want to take much time because we're already a little late, so let me just hand it over to Amy. Thanks again for coming.
Hello, welcome everyone. So good to see everyone here. Glad so many students could come. So like David said, our forum is going to be focused today on the silver maple forest. We have six expert speakers plus our two sponsors, the Friends of the Alewife Reservation, represented by Ellen Mass, and Green Cambridge, represented by Quentin Zondervan, who are going to speak as well. Before we get started, I just want to thank our additional sponsors, the Environmental Massachusetts, 350 Massachusetts, the Mystic River Watershed Association, the Sierra Club of Greater Boston, the Coalition to Preserve the Belmont Uplands, and the Belmont Citizens Forum. And I also want to thank the Environmental Club here at Lesley for a lot of work that they've done to help organize the forum as well. So we're here, of course. Oh, there's me. We're here to talk about the silver maple forest. For those of you who have not been there, it's a beautiful piece of land right in the center of the Alewife Reservation, which is the huge reservation right near the Alewife Forest. And it's fitting that we're having this forum here at Lesley. Whoops, there we go. Sorry. Having a little bit of slow with my slides. So it's fitting that it's here at Lesley because this forest has been a remarkable resource for Lesley. Here's just some images of students and educators from Lesley utilizing the reservation to explore natural ecosystems, biodiversity, ecosystem services, some of the interesting wildlife we've been able to find out there. And it's just so wonderful to have a university and then have this resource just 2 T-stops down. There's not a lot of urban areas where you could have that kind of a resource for students and for educators. And our other speakers are going to talk a lot more about the value of this land for the city of Cambridge, the ecosystem services it provides. But just for Lesley, it has a huge value for us, so we're really excited to be hosting this forum. So our program tonight, if you can see that, we're going to start with the speakers in the order that they're listed in your program. After the speakers finish, we'll have a question and answer session, so we'd appreciate if you have any questions, if you save them to the end. We'll pass out some index cards for anyone who has questions. You can write them down and then hand them in, and I'll read them and give them to the speakers to respond to. Also, we hope that after the question and answer session that you'll decide to stay, that what you hear today will get you excited, get you energized, outraged, and decide to participate in this issue. So after the end of the speakers and the question and answer session, we're going to move across the hall and have some breakout discussion groups to brainstorm and discuss ideas and ways, actions that we could take that might help protect this forest and convince the public and legislators that it's really worth protecting. You'll also notice in your programs that you should have seen a postcard that's addressed to some of the legislators that we're trying to convince. So if you're moved during the forum, you can fill out that postcard, sign it, and return it to the desk where you got your programs, and we'll be happy to mail those for you as well. So with that, I'm going to get us started with our first speaker of the evening, Ellen Mass. I'll just introduce her for you. Ellen was educated at Goddard College and worked as an English teacher for many years at the Cambridge Ridge and Latin High School. She founded the Friends of the Alewife Reservation in 2002, and through that group has run over 100 cleanup projects, along with educational projects, outreach projects to publicize the 130-acre reserve throughout the local community. She also runs an ecology camp each summer for urban high school students, including a lot of students from the Cambridge Ridge Latin School. She and her colleagues from Belmont have conducted a 7-year legal battle to protect the Alewife Reservation from development and try to avoid destruction of the ecosystem. She's also been active in civic affairs on the Women's Commission, the Peace Commission, and as a leader of delegations to several of Cambridge's sister cities. In summary, none of us would be here tonight without Ellen's tireless efforts on behalf of the forest, so it's fitting that she gets us started tonight. Ellen?
You'll be seeing of the virtual tour that we have for all of you. Those of you who have not been on the reservation have a real treat ahead of you. And as I talk, you'll be seeing a tour that you can take even before you go to get familiar with the North Trail, which is 1 linear mile up to Little Pond in Belmont. So it's it's a trail that we maintain through the summer, and with different corporations come out and help keep it up so you can go and enjoy yourself with a friend or with a group. So greetings, citizens, students, non-citizens, all friends of nature. I was introduced, so I don't have to introduce myself. But Friends of Alewife Reservation has presented many forums and activities on this subject, and we've brought our rare urban wild awareness to you, which a number of you here tonight have attended, through educational venues, stewarding individual and classroom science projects, recreation, the city drainage and environmental infrastructure work that's just been almost completed. But many things in life we become very shocked about, which confound us, which are illustrated most recently in the events in Boston. However, this issue of floodplain, habitat, climate adaptation has had over 10 years of exploration and advocacy for change, and we have had time to inform municipal and state agencies and political bodies of the science of the matter, both locally and federally. We've not made much progress, however. Others sometimes correct me to say, Ellen, the trees are still standing, and that is progress. Well, development plans on the Silver Maple Forest continue to move forward in Belmont despite a pending lawsuit and citizen outrage. We have passed bills of preservation and purchase through the House and Senate. These were placed in the environmental bond bill first, and then they went through the House and Senate, thanks to, at that time, Representative Brownsberger. We're told at the end, we failed at the end without fair scrutiny of the actual science and environmental potential of this area, the environmental value of the area. So Cambridge has written 7 resolutions, and most recently, Councilor Van Bussicom has thanked the Belmont Conservation Commission for continuing its appeal, which it recently backed out of. The Coalition to Preserve Belmont Uplands, of which FAR is a plaintiff on the case, continues to litigate in the state courts and to raise money in Belmont for the next appeals, which to date have not brought a great deal of assurance. Environmental groups such as the Sierra Club and Audubon Sanctuary magazine and their news outreach have promoted protection of this area over the years, as have have had many other groups. We now have this virtual tour, which you can take before, after, or during your walks down our 1 linear mile north trail, as I mentioned before. FAR has had the ecology camp, which Amy already mentioned. Now, we've come to the point where we do not know what to do. Perhaps that is why you are all here tonight, to help guide us through what might be called a dead-end alley. There is much energy in this room, I hope, and determination by the organizations to prevent yet a further tragedy in the Boston area. We are grateful they and the speakers' expertise have been brought together to help you understand and to get behind a very noble campaign and cause, and we look forward to your staying afterwards to join a group and help guide us through this. The virtual tour looks like it's coming to an end, and the only way you can get more of it is to go out and see the actual wood warblers and the floodplain forest that we're so fortunate to have in Cambridge and this region. So thank you for listening to a few words and for coming tonight.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lucia Lovichson. Lucia holds a master's degree in geophysics from Harvard University and a master's degree in engineering geology from the University of Padua. Excuse me. She's an expert in GIS, remote sensing, environmental geology, and energy. She's worked for many years on sustainable energy development, as well as utilizing GIS and remote sensing for educational purposes. Let me get that. She is currently the project director for the Afroterra Foundation, where she organizes geological information for national and international projects. So thank you very much for joining us to talk about the landscape of the reservation.
Thank you. Is it this one? Yes. Okay, great. Good evening. I don't know much about Alewife Brook Reservation, I tell you right away, but I remember one thing that I moved out of the area of Cambridge, but when I was in Cambridge, I was living in Harvard Square actually with my kids. We used to use a lot that area, and we really are, this is one of the main reasons why I'm here, because I really feel very attached to that area. Has given us a great, enjoyment. The Alewife Brook Reservation, this is just what I found from the Department of Conservation and Recreation that is operating this reservation. Is open year-round, covers 120 acres of urban wildlife. The habitat is an array of indigenous and migration animals. Both osprey and great blue heron is mostly a wetland, and they say that is reachable right now through miniature bike path and MBTA station that is visible. Oh, I don't know. Can you see? I mean, it's no more now. What happened here? Because it's timed. Okay. Okay, that is better, but that is not yet my slide here. How comes? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yes. No. Oh no, I'm trying to go up. Oh, okay. Wait a moment. Okay. All right. Okay. No, it's.
See it in the poster.
Oh, it is a hard, why? Okay, strange. Anyway, it is inside that screen there. Let me see. Okay, so I have to come up here to see with you. Here I tried to, I'm sorry for the quality, it's very poor here, it seems, but this is a fresh pond, the big, the pond that you see, and the one in yellow is really the reservation with the maple, silver maple forest. The point here is, as you know, that area is really shared by 3 towns. The Cambridge town that is down here to the south, Belmont that is north-west, Arlington, and also in part the same park, what they consider park, reservation, continues into also Somerville, that is the other one. Another point that I wanted to constrain, to show to you is that orange line that you see here is circling the fresh pond area. And what is important is somehow at Massachusetts state level, across different GIS and science also, is given that area is considered as a separate area, as a separate basin, okay? And that is, from hydrologic point of view, I know that some of you are here with that are hydrologists, is a very strange statement, I think. Okay, so let us, okay, so why it is strange? I'm sorry you can't see anything there, it's really too bad. The strange statement is because of this map here. What I have done here is just to show, that one in pink is the boundary of a watershed. It means that if a drop of water, the rain, fall down, okay, from the sky, if it is, south of that line, it goes, is drained into the Charles River that you see over there, is really the answer. If it is instead going into, north of that boundary, it goes into the Mystic River. So it's the Mystic River watershed. So the point here is that really you should consider the fresh pond, this is my take, the fresh pond and the Alewife ponds, reservoir ponds, as all one system, feeding into the little river, the Alewife brook, into that are tributary to the Mystic River. So that changes really the dynamic. Why? Because if you consider not only a point of view, physical point of view, but also quality of water point of view, it's very important to continue to have really grade A, the water, the drinkable water that is in fresh pond, but one of the worst waters are the one actually in the ponds along the Alewife reservoir. And there will be even more threatened, I think, by any development, because you increase the surface runoff, because there is a pavement, that is going down, prepared, that is for the development, and there is already Route 2 that really the runoff from all the water, from the car passing through is really bad. This is why they are continuously talking, I think, about storm management and water management. Another thing that I want, because I'm sorry you can't see anything, so I'll go into that, is you see that there is, let us talk a moment a little bit about the geology. What is, oh yes, yeah, no, but here is better. I will use my hand, I'm part Italian, so it's fine. If you see, let us talk a moment about the geology, because it's important, because one of the 2 major limitations of all Cambridge, all the city of Cambridge, is really, one is the geology of the soil, and second is the floodplain, okay, the water. And, oh guys, sorry. So the geology of is because that area that is Alewife is really has what is called the sensitive clay. Sensitive clay is a clay that is fine but rich in organic matter. If it is slightly disturbed, collapse. And this is why the MBTA had a huge problem, okay? And anyone that is constructing will have a huge problem. They are required to build on piles. Now, in order to build on piles, you have to have is forbidden to the water, permanent dewatering. What does it mean? That if you are also into a flood zone, you will try to pump out water from the basement as much as you can, right? Wrong. you cannot do here because that would expose the piles and would really weaken the whole structure, the whole building. Okay, so you have that to consider. And then let us, I'll skip all the geology another time, okay? And the other part is really the floodplain. Let us go to the floodplain and then I finish. Maybe you can't even, oh gosh, you can't see anything. Okay. It is, again, this is zooming in, okay? And you can see there is the building. There is a dark blue, a light blue here, and green. Okay, the dark blue and light blue green, these are like Q3 flood zone. Is usually you are mandated by federal government to add insurance because you have the probability to have any time of the year 1% of probability of flooding, complete flood. And that is the green instead is 500 years, okay? But what happens? You have to put in the context of global warming. Global warming mobilizes more water in the atmosphere, becomes more erratic, more downpouring, more erratic, more violent. And so all these numbers have to be reassessed continuously, and they are. And so this is the biggest, the second biggest constraint on this area that is really huge, actually. Okay, and here is a fantastic opportunity. I was mentioning to Walter here, that I found in the department, from the Department of Conservation. This is, I'm sorry that you can't see very much, but the one on the right, your right, is really showing that they apparently have done a tree inventory in Cambridge, but not yet in Belmont, Arlington, and Somerville. So it's very important, this is my personal opinion, right now, to really put the pressure as much as you can to have really a complete inventory, a right inventory of the trees. And another thing is here to my left, is like the percentage canopy density. Belmont has the highest percentage of canopy density, Cambridge and the others are less. So what I mean is that, sorry, when I finish, is that there is a wonderful opportunity to really work with the cities because it's important to preserve what you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry about the technical issues. But Richard has requested that we have to keep the lights on because it's messing with the recording function. So hopefully we'll still be able to visualize the slides. Okay, so moving on to our next speaker, Scott Horsley. Scott is a consulting hydrologist, a business owner, educator, and inventor. He received a bachelor's in biology from Southeastern Massachusetts University and a master's in geology and marine affairs from the University of Rhode Island. He's the president and CEO of Horsley & Witten Incorporated and has more than 20 years of experience in water resource science and management, including delineation methods for critical water resources, carrying capacity analysis of watersheds, and innovative water management strategies. He also received the Environmental Innovator Award from the EPA for his work in constructed wetlands and stormwater treatment. So thank you for joining us, Scott.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I have a question. How many people here tonight live in a watershed? Just put your hand up.
Everybody.
Everybody should be putting their hands up. It's like hydrology, watershed 101. So the point is, no matter what we do, where we live, we're going to have an effect on the watershed. But I'm going to talk just for a few minutes tonight about some of the work we did here in the Alewife watershed. And this is a little bit of a follow-up to what we just heard. This is a map showing the watershed, and you've already heard the definition. This is the area, the land area that drains to a river. But this is for all of the Mystic, and then you can see color-coded here the Alewife, which is a sub-basin of that larger Mystic watershed. Oops. There's a little delay here. So this is what the watershed looked like around 1900. It's important when we're analyzing the effects of land use and watersheds to look back historically, and as far back as the geology, which of course in this area is around 15,000 years ago, which I agree has a major effect on all of what we are dealing with today, but certainly the historical land use development of the watershed. And again, here we're looking specifically at the Alewife. This picture, boy, that's tough with the lights on. Can we have the lights off just for 2 seconds so people can see? It's a tough room. This shows the impervious cover within that watershed. So again, picking up on something we just heard, about 47% of this watershed is impervious cover, meaning rooftop, parking lots, roads. And that has a very, very significant effect on the hydrology, how water moves, and very much affects this flooding issue that we're really here to talk about, or at least one of the things we want to talk about. And this is, boy, these slides are unbelievable. There's something going on with the projector, because I know these. And first I thought it was your slides, but I've used these slides many, many times. But anyways, this is the floodplain, which of course we can't see here. Reiterate what was just said before, this is the focus area where during the 100-year event we get waters at a certain level that become problematic. Okay, we can see this one a little bit. This shows what happens, the effects of this impervious area. So the left-hand diagram shows natural hydrology, a certain amount of precipitation. Some of it infiltrates into the ground as recharge, some of it runs off the surface, some of it goes back to the atmosphere as evapotranspiration. But you can see in the right-hand picture, those numbers are very different. So that's in effect what is happening in this watershed as it becomes developed. More impervious surface creates more surface runoff and less infiltration recharge into the ground, which means less groundwater and more flooding. Now there are ways to deal with this, and one way is not to develop the land, which clearly is the goal for this silver maple forest. Keeping things in their natural state is by far the best way to manage a watershed. However, we are in an urban environment, and we have something called zoning that people voted in, which says some of the land's going to get developed. There's no way around it, not all of it. So the other part of the equation here is for the land that gets developed, which in this area is going to be most of it, no doubt about it, it's already happened, it's going to continue to happen, that development has to be done the correct way. So there is something called green infrastructure. I teach a course at Tufts University in low impact development, green infrastructure, and that's what the whole course is about. How to design projects so that they're hydrologically neutral. So post-development, we have the same hydrology that occurs naturally. And see, these are some of the techniques that can be done on a project-by-project basis. This is a picture of a bioretention area, or some people call it a rain garden. In fact, tomorrow on the Tufts campus, we're having our first rain garden party, because we built our first rain garden on the campus, and we're going to get together and celebrate that as a means of controlling stormwater on the Tufts University campus. There's things like stormwater planters. These are vegetated systems that can be integrated with the building itself to capture some of that rainwater. Instead of using drinking water to irrigate these systems, we could use the rainwater from the rooftop to irrigate the greenery or the greenscaping and the landscaping around the buildings. We've all heard about green roofs. This is a picture of a green roof. This is a very good way to manage water, especially in a floodplain like this where we have a lot of flooding problems. We hold some of that water in the rooftops temporarily and thereby reduce the amount of runoff and flooding. Here's another picture of a green roof. These can be very useful also in terms of other uses of the roofs. In this case, a little park area on top of the roof. So there's some real benefits to this. And then the other option is something called a blue roof. We're doing work in New York City, Manhattan right now, to try to reduce the peak flows. And believe it or not, these are little boxes. These are about 20 inches by 20 inches. And the high-tech solution to managing stormwater in New York City is putting these little boxes on rooftops with rocks in them so they don't blow off. They have little holes in the bottom of it, so when it rains, instead of it immediately running off and creating flooding throughout the city, which is a big problem there too, it collects in these boxes and then slowly leaks out the little holes. High-tech, right? Okay, and that's what they're doing. That's one of the things they're doing in Manhattan to deal with this problem. So that can be done here. And these are very low cost, very low tech solutions. And I think that was my last slide. Come back.
So we'll move to the last of our first half of the speakers. So after John has completed speaking, if we could switch and the speakers from the second half could come up. So John Reinhardt our fourth speaker. He's the president of the Mystic Water Association, which is a very prominent environmental organization here working to protect the Mystic River and its surrounding watershed. He's been involved with the Mystic River Watershed Association since 1988 and is also the branch chief for the Industrial Wastewater Policy and Regulations for the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. So he has 30 years of professional experience in environmental policy analysis, ranging from industrial wastewater, drinking water, toxic substance control, strategy development, and dealing with hazardous waste. He's also a longtime resident of the watershed who lives in Somerville and has served on the Somerville Conservation Commission from 1994 to 2013. So welcome, John, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the sponsors of this, especially Quentin and Ellen, for being so dedicated and persistent in this issue, which is really a huge issue for the Mystic River Watershed Association because we've been involved with this for a long time. Our association's been around since 1970s, and one of our presidents back in the 80s was battling the MBTA, when you can imagine what that kind of battle would be. The MBTA on the ramp that comes off of Route 2 and comes into the Alewife T station. That is built on wetlands. They illegally built it, and they were never called to account, but we tried. My part in this forum is really pretty simple. It's water quality. And water quality is very much related to this valuable forest habitat in one of the most urban watersheds in the state. The Watershed Association regularly monitors water quality in the Alewife Brook sub-watershed, whether it's the very elevated bacterial levels coming out of Belmont to the regular monthly baseline sampling at the Alewife Brook or Wind Brook. We're looking at these conditions all the time. We even have started a clean water campaign and have chosen the Alewife as the initial point of focus. So our association really, more than anybody, values the pervious surface that's contained in the watershed. So which button do I push here? Enter. No. 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 That was it? Okay, you can't see it. So the slide that I had, which was really a very high-tech graphic from Google Earth, basically focusing in on the Alewife Reservation and the silver maple forest, was really, it said more than I can say in way more than my allotted time. But essentially it had the Alewife Reservation and the silver maple forest surrounded by, that's not my slide, it doesn't matter, it's okay. So there's just development all around it, and development, roofs, roads, and everything that's impervious, creating a lot of runoff. So the maple forest is really an unusual respite for the seemingly unrelenting impervious surface that surrounds it. And the open space provides valuable cleaning function to the water that's otherwise overused water in this area. The water percolates through the pervious, the ground, and eventually resurfaces in the Alewife without the typical profile of urban runoff pollutants. So the basic message here is really pretty simple. If you saw my slide, you would have it burned in your mind, but the message is that impervious surface, which is so common in this watershed, is really degrading our everyday environment And this little oasis in a very heavily urbanized area is really just so valuable. And to develop this really pristine area, well, it's not pristine, but it's much more natural than any other area in this watershed, is just adding insult to injury. It really shouldn't be developed, and the water quality aspect is one of the things that can be listed as one of its major attributes. So thank you very much, and that is it.
Thank you, John. It won't take too long. There we go. All right, thank you. So our next speaker, Minka van Buzikum. Minka is a city councilor here in Cambridge and has for the past 3 decades lived, worked, and volunteered in Cambridge. She holds a bachelor's degree in molecular biology and a master's degree in public health with a focus on environmental health and epidemiology. She's worked as a researcher for Harvard McLean Hospital and the MIT Cancer Center and as an epidemiologist at the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. She also serves on the nonprofit boards of Green Cambridge and of the Mystic Watershed Association. So thank you very much, Counselor, for joining us tonight.
So thank you very much for organizing this forum. So I'm going to talk about something completely different because I'm supposed to talk about politics. And this is a highly charged political situation. I just want to let you know that I've only been a politician for a year and a half-ish. So I am humbled that I'm here today to talk about the political process because groups have been working on preserving this forest and connecting it to the habitat that is part of the Alewife Reservation for more than a decade. And so I feel that I'm not so qualified to talk about this, but I'm going to try. And I have to say that once I heard that there were mink in the reservation, I knew that I had to come out and support this work. So people like Ann Paulson, Sal DiDomenico, Alice Wolf, Senator Brownsberger, Representative Brownsberger, these are politicians that have tried to use the political process to preserve this forest because they have heard from the experts, from the scientists, from the hydrologists, the importance of preserving it. And they know that having a jewel like this, as John Reinhardt said, in such an urban area is another benefit that is worth preserving. And I firmly believe that part of the role of government is to think about the best public good. And so I'm trying to follow in the footsteps of these state legislatures that have tried to protect this forest. At the local level, Mark Piello from Belmont has tried to support the Conservation Commission in Belmont to preserve this this area. Henrietta Davis, currently the mayor of Cambridge, but before she was mayor, she was advocating for a regional effort, Arlington, Belmont, and Cambridge working together to preserve this area. Craig Kelly, also a Cambridge City Councilor, has tried on numerous occasions to to raise the awareness of the importance of protecting this habitat and preventing flooding, as we heard from the hydrologist and the expert opinions. At the state level, Ellen alluded to bills that have been put in place to try to get money allocated so that this land could be purchased. There's been a bill to value this property, to go through the process of doing that and setting aside money. The cities of Belmont and Cambridge have thought about using their Community Preservation Act funding to set money aside so that they could buy this if and when the land became available for purchase. Zoning has been changed to try to prevent commercial development. So preserving this forest has used a lot of people who have very strong and sophisticated sense of how the politics can work to benefit. But despite that, we're still here having this forum talking about this lovely piece of land that we want to protect. And part of that is the owner of this property is a very politically savvy person. And this group has, oddly enough, manipulated the system in such a way that at one point his group and members of the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, were being represented by the Attorney General of the state against the Conservation Commission that was trying to preserve it. So I won't go into the details of that, but just a very odd coalescing of events for him to be on the same side as the DEP. He's applied for money from the state to use another part of the political process, which is to get affordable housing built on this land. That's the 40B process that you might have heard about. He's applied for money from the state, so $42 million, because they want housing built, and he's going to say, I know how to build it, I'm going to build it here. So the state has agreed that if he gets a building permit and goes forward with getting his permits, then they will grant him the $52 million. So he's a very savvy person. But that being said, we've got two things that are on our side. One is something that I hesitate to kind of pull out of the back pocket, and that is climate change and the vulnerability, and that was alluded to a little bit already. And I would hate to say that we want to use that as our ally, but this is a really serious tool. You already mentioned that the Cambridge water supply, which is coming from the Fresh Pond area, is potentially at risk. And that's something that needs to be talked about. And the investment that Cambridge has made into trying to protect the stormwater infrastructure around the the Alewife T station is another major investment that Cambridge has made. So those things are at risk with climate change. Having that parcel developed, the Silver Maple Forest developed, will just add to the issues that we'll have to work against. So I want to end by paraphrasing Margaret Mead. And this is the paraphrasing. So never doubt that a small group of committed, thoughtful citizens can preserve a forest. Because indeed, that is really the only way that we're going to preserve this forest. And I look forward to working with people in the audience to make sure that that happens. We need to raise awareness. We've been talking about this for a long time, but we have to do this. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mike Nakagawa. Mike is an engineer at a leading medical device company. He's worked to support the Alewife area environmental concerns, in particular in relation to regulatory compliance, for over 15 years. His expertise lies in regard to the Wetlands Protection Act and hazardous waste mitigation. He is a board member of the Alewife Neighbors and the Cambridge Public Health Department's West Nile Virus Advisory Group. So thank you very much for being here, Mike.
Thank you very much, and thanks for hosting this forum. I'm coming in from a slightly different angle of being labeled as one of those activists and a neighborhood, someone in the neighborhood, but I'm also an engineer, and so that's how I've gotten my foot in the ground and some respect from some of the people that we deal with, like the DEP. I'm not afraid of numbers, and I'm sorry if I have too many of them, but that's some of what needs to be done, is to show that things are real, and it's not just what you want to do, but how things are. This is I guess sorry. I'll talk a little bit about the uplands development, some urban heat island effects, and some of the regulations and what that really means and how little it means at times. On the left, you may recognize this building. This is one of what's sometimes known as the Ringe Towers. There are 3 buildings across the Alewife T station. Each has about 250 units in it. So if you want to see what the size of structure, if it was put in one building, the Belmont Uplands are planning to have 300 units, I believe. You can't really see the pictures in the upper right. That's a view from the south side of the river looking at what is currently the Belmont Uplands, and you can see there's not much out there looking out into Arlington. It's all nature. I'll skip over the maps, but I guess one point I'd like to make is here's the Belmont Uplands, everything around it. So the building in this area, the blue areas around the side are all floodplain areas. If it floods, any people will be stuck in the middle of an island there. And it does flood. The bright colored picture there is one of my favorite scenes of Alewife. As one of the 1990s storms, there is a car in the middle of a parking lot, which you can see is all reflecting the water all around it. And that's on Acorn Park Drive right there. So this area does flood. It does flood frequently. Some of the buildings that are being torn down now, every storm, they would get the pumps out because it would flood the first floor. To my daughter's dismay, I stole some of her slides on a little study we did. She was part of, she's at Cambridge Ringe Inlet High School, and they had an environmental challenge. And her group presented some urban heat island effects where they built 2 little model houses, one of concrete board and one with green roof and ivy on the side representing a green wall. And you can see when you put the halogen lights on these 2 separate buildings, one of them, the temperature kept going up. The other one kind of plateaued, the middle green line, showing that having vegetation keeps the temperature from rising, because as there's more heat, the plants take the water out of the ground, convert it into vapor. That's a very heat-grabbing process, and then the water vapor goes out of the area, and you keep on keeping the place relatively cool. Meanwhile, with buildings, you just keep pouring heat in, and it gets absorbed into the buildings, so that later at night, after the sun goes down, the heat stays and gets released back into the environment on concrete buildings, but there's no latent heat because it's evaporated, and very quickly the temperature drops near green buildings. But I chose this slide also because it's kind of representing, if there were no buildings, it would just be all greenery, doing the evapotranspiration, as mentioned before, and keeping the area cool, which I have to believe helps the wetland areas. If you're going to put a big heat source and a lot of heat near the surrounding wetlands, you're going to dry it out. You're going to change the habitat of having that so close to the wetlands, which completely surround the proposed building. One of the problems that we find is everyone says, oh, but they're environmental laws. We have the Wetlands Protection Act. That's a state act saying that we're going to protect wetlands and floodplain areas. They have specific targets that are given of how much water needs to be stored, and they all look very nicely done, but when you come and try to use those and say this building doesn't match what this natural resource area is, you find out that in order to get that law passed, there's a lot of wiggle room. There are a lot of vague statutes, so there's some details and some that, depending on if you get enough support, you can interpret the laws in different ways and you'll get different outcomes. And that's what I'd like to stress, is that right now it tends to be the people with money can sway in a certain way, and it's up to other people to say, what we really need is to preserve this area more than we need affordable housing, the limited affordable housing that will be presented. So there are limitations in the environmental regulations. There's the Executive Order 11988 specifically says that the federal government does not want to support building in these floodplain areas, and they go on beyond the 100-year floodplain, which is a state rule, into the 500-year floodplain. And they say they will try not to support those sorts of development projects. So we need to take advantage of that. Unfortunately, it was mentioned this was a 40B project, which means that they can overrule the local laws trying to protect the environment. And so now we have to go and say it is worth more to the people to save the environment than it is to have that little bit of affordable housing in this area that doesn't really make sense for housing. So that's what I'd like to say. If you could get involved and try to get the political sway towards protecting the environment, because the existing laws are not going to do it on their own. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good point. Okay, our next speaker is David Morimoto. David is the director of Lesley University's Natural Science and Mathematics Division, so most of you guys, students here, probably know him. He's an ecologist and a conservation biologist and has studied bird communities in Massachusetts and South America. He's currently involved in urban ecology studies and conservation work and education, both here and in Guyana. He's overseen the development of an education or environmental-based curriculum with a focus on community-based environmental research to build research and education collaborations with local schools, neighborhood organizations, and nonprofit groups. He was also elected an inaugural National Leadership Fellow by the National Center for Science and Civic Engagement in 2008. So thank you, David, for speaking and also your help organizing the forum.
Let's save this forest already. It is worth more than the money, and it's for O'Neill Properties, by the way. That's the person who wants to develop it, O'Neill Properties. For them, it's the money. They wanted to develop commercial and research and development buildings there first, and that was turned down, so then he turned to housing, and now he's trying to work the affordable housing market, using his political savviness to try to make his profit on this land. And for Belmont, it's probably about the money too, tax revenues and things like that. But it's much more valuable as it is. What is it, enter or return?
Little arrows.
Just which, the central? So why we should save our forests from ecological perspectives, you know, it's not just ecological perspectives, they're logical perspectives, quite frankly. So I'd like to take the big picture view. There are 7+ billion people on planet Earth. And every day we're losing about 75 to 100 species to extinction. That's the backdrop of this little development project here locally. And most of those people in the world now live in cities. Over half the people in the world live in cities. Over 75%, almost 80% of the people in the United States live in cities. And along with that has become a really serious problem, a disconnection from nature. That's one of the reasons why this forest is still being threatened, because people are so disconnected from nature, they don't realize that it's more valuable as it is than would be development. So connecting to nature is extremely important, getting out there and being part of nature. Actually, there's been a disorder called nature deficit disorder that's been well documented now about how normal development is not occurring among many people in the United States because they lack immersive time in natural surroundings during critical periods of development. The brain is influenced by complex nature, and when you deprive the brain of that complex nature, you deprive it of normal development. Not only that, there's clear studies now that are showing that local ecological knowledge is being lost rapidly, especially in more economically developed nations and parts of nations and industrialized societies. We're losing local ecological knowledge. Now, that might not seem like a big thing to you, but really, the very first human endeavor, the oldest human endeavor on planet Earth is natural history, is knowing our environment, knowing what to eat, what not to eat, what to use as medicine, how to use things to build, how to harvest the forest for ceremonial things and to make items from it. So we've lost that connection and that natural history knowledge, which is the very thing that got us here to begin with. So as a whole, the species is in quite a precarious position, I think, because of this. And so this is not just a global issue. It's obviously percolates all the way down and emerges from the problem in industrial societies at the local level. And of course, climate change is another global backdrop to all of this. These 500-year floodplains and 150-year floodplains are probably more like 150-year floodplains now with all the changes that are happening. As Lucia said, everything has to be recalibrated because of climate change. So that's one reason. I mean, and the forest definitely does have buffering effects on local temperature, as Mike's graph showed. So from a global... Mike's daughter's graph, right? So, from a global perspective, there's ample reason, just even from the global perspective alone. And from the landscape perspective, I mean, you can see it. I mean, the Boston Basin ecoregion is over 72% developed, and almost 40%, almost half of that is impervious surfaces. So, I mean, logically, it would make sense to keep a little bit of green in there. So, from the landscape perspective, it's something that is a rarity. And when you put it in the context of how important, just how important nature is for our own development, let alone the biodiversity that occurs there, let alone the water quality and water storage issues, let alone the air and soil issues, all the ecosystem services provided by this, even just the psychological value on the human spirit is important enough, I think, to preserve this. And so this silver maple forest, even though it's small, and I don't know if you've really clearly seen it, but here's Alewife Reservation. Here's a T-stop here, the Alewife T. Here's the Alewife Reservation, which is really a linear kind of reservation. So it doesn't have a lot of interior habitats. Linear, it's mostly edge habitat and stream corridor habitat. And it's a really interesting mosaic of aspen forest stands, of grasslands, and shrublands with lots of sumac. So it's a really interesting sort of variegated habitat mosaic here. And here's a silver maple forest, which is sort of a more of a rectangle or spherical or round piece of land, which has forested habitat, so it's a unique type of forest, very different from what's here. So it would add if we preserved it, it would be a perfect thing. I mean, it makes sense to just tack it on the Alewife Reservation. It would extend the habitat value of that, would increase the habitat diversity by providing a new type of habitat, and also provide some core habitat for interior species away from the edge, which those are the species of most concern, quite frankly. So within the landscape perspective, it's a unique component of a habitat mosaic. If you look at this Boston Basin, I mean, it's also along a major corridor for bird migration. If you look at Mount Auburn Cemetery, which is one of the best places to see birds, it's along a flyway, a spin-off of the Atlantic flyway for migratory birds. It actually helps to create a green corridor of habitat moving through the landscape. So it's incredibly important. I mean, if you want to know and see that for yourself in the next 2 weeks or so, the peak land bird migration is occurring. Just go out to Alewife Reservation with your binoculars and you'll hear tons of different birds that you've probably never heard before. And so, and obviously from the landscape perspective, there's lots of ecosystem services that this habitat provides that we've already heard about, from water quality, I mean, just think about it like your liver. What happens in your liver? There's sinuses where the blood flows through there very slowly. It's detoxified. It's really important. It's an essential organ for your body. Would you want to remove your liver from your body? No. So removing this piece of land on this incredibly important floodplain is tantamount to removing an organ from the body. So it's really important. And historical value, this is the southern end of the Great Swamp, which was the birthplace of ornithology for William Brewster. And that's probably the reason why there's so much wildlife. The wildlife value of this place is incredible. I've seen fisher cats out there. There are 3 species of wild dog: coyote, red fox, and gray fox. There's white-tailed deer. There's muskrat. There's beaver. There's northern river otter. There's great horned owls, great blue herons, black crowned night herons, mink, and alewife. alewife. There's a historic run of alewife and blueback herring that run along the Alewife River. So it's, and there's no other buffer of natural vegetation surrounding that area. So it makes no sense whatsoever, really, to develop it, unless you want to make money and destroy natural habitat. Local reasons, I mean, these kind of run into each other, but they're not just local, and you see that they're not necessarily, but anyway, tri-town location is usually a good place to do conservation, because different towns can collaborate, each contribute a portion to preserve land. It's actually a strategy. There's a whole book in the field of area of study that looking at borderlands as key areas for conservation. So it's an opportunity to bring ourselves together and look at, I mean, we've always had this problem with political boundaries over, you know, not coinciding with ecosystem boundaries, so you have to make some sort of new regional effort to try to preserve these areas. And again, coming back to the value to the human spirit and human health, it's so accessible. It's the only urban wild in this in the greater Boston area that's accessible by T and by bike paths and by road. So it's educational value. It's value for passive recreation. It's value for community health and peace of mind. Cannot be, they can't put a price tag on that. It's well worth more than $50 million. So, so in other words, if we develop this forest, it would compromise the ecological integrity of the landscape, of the greater alewife ecosystem. It'll obviously negatively impact the populations of species that depend upon it. It's tremendous biodiversity, giant puffball mushrooms in there, cranberry viburnum, swamp milkweed. It's an amazing place. It'll compromise the ecosystem services it provides, and it will impoverish the local populace, compromising community health and education. And so you might have seen a quote on the very first slide that Aldo Leopold said, to save every cog in the wheel is the first precaution of intelligent tinkering. Development of this forest is not an intelligent thing. So there are plenty of things we can do. This is what we're going to try to call for groups to get involved with, organizing these kinds of events after. And I just say the cost of doing nothing is unacceptable. Some of you students might have come to the John Francis talk. My friend John Francis, who walked for 22 years and took a 17-year vow of silence as an environmental act. And his message is that the way we treat each other is the way we treat the environment, because there really isn't any separation between us and nature. So developing this forest would be, or saving this forest, would be a humane act. And developing it would be inhumane and outright dumb, I think. It's certainly not intelligent. And what's the other word I had for it? Inhumane. Well, you get the gist. It would not be a smart thing to do. It would be a shameful thing. That's the word I want to use. And it takes more than just a small group of people with conviction. It takes courage, and the word courage comes from heart. So you have to feel it. And so get out there, see what this place is, learn about the value of it, experience it for yourself, and that'll fuel your courage, and work together with each other to try to preserve this. The time has come. It's been 10 years plus. So let's do something about this. Sorry for going over.
It's okay. Thank you, David. Very impassioned. We all agree with you. So our final speaker to wrap us up is Quentin Zondervan. He became an environmental activist while studying at Eckerd College in 1990. Luckily for us, Quentin moved permanently to Cambridge in 2004, where he was appointed to the city's Climate Action Protection Committee, which he currently chairs since 2008. And in 2011, Quentin was elected the president of Green Cambridge, a local chapter of the Massachusetts Climate Action Network. He also holds a master's in computer science from MIT and has worked professionally in software and biotech industry. So, Quentin, thank you for being here, and thanks to you and Green Cambridge for all your work organizing this forum and protecting the Slippery Maple Forest.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. Apologies for my broken voice. I have a cold. If it fails me, I have backup. As you heard from the speakers tonight, we must save the silver maple forest from destruction. The question, of course, is how. Ultimately, we have to buy the land in order to preserve it forever. This is important to remember. This is privately owned property. We don't have the right to tell a developer what to do. We have to go and buy the land from him so that we can preserve it. Unfortunately, our attempts so far have failed. We have tried twice through the state of Massachusetts, but we will never, never give up. Even when our laptops fall, we will not give up. New funding mechanisms have become available thanks to the efforts of all the activists in the community to stall this development. In the meantime, the town of Belmont has passed the Community Preservation Act, which is a funding mechanism for purchasing land for ecological preservation, historical preservation, and affordable housing. Cambridge has had Community Preservation Act in effect for over 10 years, and we have spent over $100 million on preserving land, preserving historical sites, and building affordable housing in Cambridge. Last year, Cambridge used some of its CPA funding to buy land in the town of Lincoln in order to preserve Cambridge's water supply. So that demonstrates that the city of Cambridge is willing and able to purchase land in other communities if we deem it important enough to do so. And that's why it's so important for all of us to work on convincing the city of Cambridge to use its funding mechanisms to purchase this land as well. As the awareness grows, as more of us go out there, enjoy the land, and teach other people about the value of it, we also will be able to raise more funds and open up new avenues for funding, ultimately to purchase the land. In the meantime, we have to keep the trees from getting cut down. It's really important to understand that we're now in the end game. The developer can at any moment decide to cut these trees down. They're on his private property. So we have to raise awareness. We have to start making noise and saying, no, we do not want these trees to die. We have to put sustained pressure on our local officials to say, no, we do not want this forest to come down. And we have to keep putting pressure on our state legislators to say, no, we need to find a way to preserve this forest. Will Brownsberger has been a tremendous supporter, and in fact, he's here with us in the room this evening. And we'll ask Will to come up and say a few words when I'm done. So we have to keep up that pressure and say, please help us preserve this forest. Ultimately, so that we can get a chance to negotiate with the developer to purchase the land. The last bill that was passed in the State House actually was vetoed by the governor, but it did include a provision to evaluate the property, and that was done. So we now have a value on the land that we can use to negotiate with the developer. We have to bring more attention to this issue. We're all locked in our own little homes, and we don't pay attention to what's going on around us. We have to get out there in the forest, go see the place, bring other people there. Join with the Friends of Alewife Reservation, join with Green Cambridge. We have events out there. We're having a cleanup at the reservation on Saturday. These are great opportunities to come in, enjoy nature with your family, with your friends, and feel, as David said, the value of this land to you as a person. So, to that end, to help us save this forest, I now ask all of you to stay an extra 30 minutes after we're done with the speaking program to help us organize real action. We're going to have vigils, we're going to have protests, we're going to have letter writing campaigns. We're going to up the ante. It's really important now because this is the end game. So please stay with us and please help us preserve this forest. Thank you very much. And I'd like to recognize Will Brownsberger again, Senator Will Brownsberger, to say a few words.
Thanks for having me. I would really just want to validate your efforts tonight and the efforts of the Friends and the efforts of Green Cambridge and the efforts of the Belmont groups that have been working to save this land. The Silver Maple Forest is a special place. It's a valuable urban wild. It's a place that really makes sense to preserve and conjoin with the Alewife Reservation. Most of the Alewife Reservation is lowlands. Having that uplands be a component of the reservation is a great thing for animals, because some animals need that. You think about this. This is a sort of a little wildlife preserve in the middle of, surrounded by human intrusions. I'm sure you've probably already heard this evening about all the different kinds of real wildlife that lives in there. And it's also that uplands preserving that uplands makes it a more special place for people. I mean, it's a special quiet spot that can be reached by walking from Cambridge, from Arlington. So it's a special thing to have for all these three communities, Belmont, Cambridge, and Arlington, and the effort to preserve it is a very valid one. I think that the work that people have done to raise the questions and concerns about the plans and that has kept the issue alive. It's been done in good faith, and the efforts have been very much appreciated. And I think the conversation that we're having now about how can we raise money to preserve this, because ultimately that's what we need to do, is to purchase this property if we want to preserve it. If we want to take it and convert it permanently to a wildlife use, we need to own it. And that's the effort that people have been talking about for many years, and the challenge is to make it come together. I think Cambridge has resources as a result of the CPA. I think Belmont has resources as a result of the CPA. So far, both communities have deemed other things to be higher priorities, but that's where you come in, to convey to these communities the importance of preserving this property for the long term. So thank you. Thank you, Quentin. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Anne Marie. Thank you all for all the work that you do, and it's greatly appreciated. And I hope that we have some success. So I hope that you are able to stay and participate in the process that people have sketched for the rest of the evening.
Okay, we're going to have some time now for question and answer, and I would ask if you have any questions. Lena and Maggie have some index cards. They can pass them around, so raise your hand. They can give you an index card to write it down. That'll be the most efficient way to do it. In the meantime, Ellen wanted to announce a few upcoming events in the reserve, so she can tell you about that while everyone's organizing their questions. And then when the question and answer period starts, maybe we can have the other four speakers, we can move these posters, and you guys can all sit up here, and that way everyone can answer the questions as needed. Okay, so you want to...
Tomorrow, from 1 to 5, we're fortunate to have a herbarium specialist, a curator from Harvard, who is going to take people out for species collection from 1 to 5. That's meeting at the Acorn Park lot. Anyone interested in grasses or sedges and rushes, that's the place to go. Walter Kittredge is here and is going to start taking people out the first Friday of every month. So we're very excited about that. This is an exception tomorrow. But it's supposed to be a gorgeous day. Then Saturday, as I think Quentin mentioned, we're having Earth Day and Park Serve Day with the DCR, with the Mystic River Watershed Association, and we're thinking we're going to get a very nice crowd out there to work and clean that entire reservation. We have 8 spots, including very remote forest and wetland spots that you will get to enjoy discovering this entire reservation, and also be part of the estate's Park Serve Day. And then on the 4th of May, you folks will be welcomed by poets who are going to do a poetry walk beginning at 2 o'clock. And you're going to have an impersonator of Frederick Law Olmsted, the great parks designer and world-renowned figure. He impersonates him, and he's fantastic. So you'll get poetry as well as Frederick Law Olmsted. He dresses and looks exactly like Frederick Law Olmsted. So on the June 7th, there's a bike ride, people who like to bike, and you'll circle the Alewife Reservation. People are doing these activities on their own. In the past, FAR has been pretty much the promoter and the organizer, generator of some of these, but now people are beginning to see things they can do with their friends and neighbors and with their own organizations, which really helps. The poetry walk is also sponsored by the Belmont Citizens Forum, and they've been very, very active on this. So the other activity is, I think those are our major activities, but please do, you don't have to remember what I just said, just when you leave, pick up the paper because it has everything there. And I know that there was going to be a question related to the legal issue as well, but probably there is, if there's not one within those cards, we should have our legal person speak. Is there one on there on legalities? Yeah. Okay. Well, we do have someone here who can just quickly update us on the legal process. This has gone on for many years, and we're fortunate to have Allison Link, who's part of the Coalition to Preserve Alewife, to preserve the Belmont uplands. And she will just tell us exactly where this issue stands in the courts, because that has been another reason that the trees are still standing, not just because people are waving a flag and we have people like Minka in City Council, but we actually have a group that's raised a great deal of money to keep the case going in the courts.
Thank you. It's really inspiring to be here tonight and hear all the presentations and have people attending. I grew up in Belmont, and the house I grew up in is just about here. And about 5 years ago, my husband and I moved back into my childhood home, so it's like, how much orange shag carpeting can you pull up, right? But I became involved with the cause to preserve the Belmont uplands. I feel very passionately about it, like all of you do. It is so important to preserve open space. I'm just aware, having spent my childhood in the same home in the same area, I'm aware of the differences I see even just in terms of traffic. There's just so much development going on in Cambridge, right on the Belmont line. I love animals, I love birds. It's just so key for everybody to have a place to go that's still natural, and for the animals to be able to stay there as well. You know, I sit there thinking about where are all the animals going to go if this development happens. And just for the record, I just spent $10,000 to put a French drain in my basement because we do have constant flooding. Just for the record, because I'm near the Windbrook area, and the more building that goes on, the more that increases. I became involved with this cause 5 years ago. So right around that time, 2007, following 6 weeks of hearings, the Belmont Conservation Commission denied the project, the development based on part on failure of stormwater management systems to meet 2 state standards and inadequate protocols for wildlife habitat protection. And I apologize for actually just reading this, but honestly, a lot of the scientific aspect of things or the legal aspects of things they're really complex, and I don't always understand them fully, so if anybody feels like they want to jump in those areas, please feel free, either in the middle of what I'm saying or after, to speak up. And just for the record, with the affordable housing, only 20% of the 300 units would be affordable housing. The other 80% would be absolutely luxury upscale apartments. So this whole thing about it being an NIMBY issue, that Belmont just doesn't want affordable housing in our area is ridiculous. 2008, the developer appeals to the Department of Environmental Protection. The DEP reviewing officer grants a superseding order to the developer. The Conservation Commission requests an injunctory hearing. The next year, the hearings were held over 4 days. 10 local residents, including the Coalition to Preserve the Belmont Uplands and FAR, together called the Coalition, are allowed to intervene. And if you would like more information about what the Coalition is doing to try to continue these cases and just trying to raise awareness, as we all are, our materials are right out on the table right outside the door. So please pick those up. The next year, decision from the adjunctory DEP review issued in favor of the developer. Concom and interveners filed separate appeals to Superior Court. The next year, we're up to 2011 now, Middlesex Superior Court rules against the coalition and most of the Concom's complaints. It remands an issue of the Conservation Commission to the DEP for further and more complete findings about whether stormwater management standard number 3 is met. And last but not least, 2012, we appealed Superior Court decision to the State Appeals Court, and we've had a hearing held in the coalition's appeal. A decision is expected in the late spring, and we still have not received that decision. So we're still waiting on that. And I don't know if anybody has anything to add in terms of the legal side of things, but I definitely echo the sentiments that are being expressed here about we really need to, excuse the expression, need to kick some ass now.
So we have a few really good questions. So I'm going to field them and I'll point them towards the speaker. We don't have time for everyone to speak on each question, but if you do have something really important to say, you can also feel free to chime in. So the first question is whether or not we can take the forest by eminent domain. Quentin, you mentioned you might be able to comment on that. Or you can as well? Okay.
I can as well. I mean, of course, eminent domain means that we would forcibly take the property away from the developer, and that's certainly possible, but even then, we would have to compensate the developer, and that's why it was so important to have the land valued, because at least we know what we would have to compensate the developer with. I will say that it's very, very uncommon for that to happen, and in this particular case, pretty unlikely right now. So unless we made a lot of noise and really convinced our local officials that that's what we want, that's probably not a practical solution.
Right, so eminent domain isn't free, and it would have to be Belmont that would have to do it. And so I think that's just not a productive avenue.
Mm-hmm. Kind of a follow-up to that, has there been any anything done so far with fundraising or external grants to buy it, or is that still,
Well,
I don't know if you or anyone knows?
The CPA, the Community Preservation Act that both Belmont and Cambridge have, is a source of money. And then it would be private donations. And perhaps the town's, Cambridge is, as was mentioned, fairly well off. So, you know, I imagine that given enough pressure, Cambridge would use some of its resources to purchase the land if the developer wanted to sell it.
And this might be a good question for either Ellen or Allison. Is there any centralized online social media presence for the Save the Silver Maple Forest campaign? Yeah.
There is a Facebook site. What was the address? Because I'm not a social media.
Well, if you go on Facebook and you search, in the search box, you type Save the Silver Maple Forest, the coalition's webpage will come up.
And the coalition's website is www.belmontcoalition.org.
Yeah.
If you really want to know a lot of the history and the reports and the real science of the area, please go to the website. We have 10 years of all of the reports, the DEP history, and also all of the back and forth with notice what do you call it when you respond to the notice of intent? It was response to comments. So we have that from many, many, many citizens. So we've gotten things over 10 years of compilations of science, include Mr. Horsley. Scott Horsley did a fabulous study of the upper Alewife Basin, showing the impervious situation. So we've got plenty of information for you to share with your friends and for spokespersons that you'd like to do it with. And so we've got the coalition, we've got Facebook, we've got Twitter, we've got all of them.
You have Twitter? What's the hashtag for Twitter?
Alewife Friends. Go to Alewife Friends. We've got a lot of following Twitter. And I have one more thing to add. Beth, I forgot to mention the herring run. Remember when I was mentioning the activities, the herring run is one of the biggest, most exciting events on the watershed. And at that event, you get to see the larger and get a sense of the larger watershed. So that's coming up.
That's Sunday, May 19th. It's a 5K run/walk and 3 paddling races.
Yeah.
You can register at mysticriver.org.
Do you have something to add to that? Raminka, did you want to add something to that? Or?
No, I wanted to make
Oh,
sure
okay.
there was a Twitter
Oh, okay.
handle.
I think we should get the Twitter accounts for the key people who need to hear our voices on this and blitz them. I mean, I think students with their social media skills could organize a really nice Twitter
Yeah.
campaign.
Yeah, that could be something we could talk about in one of the groups. Probably the civic outreach, or I guess if you're doing that group, you could discuss that with students. And David, this follow-up question is also for you. Your presentation and arguments are so persuasive. Why haven't they prevailed? Why hasn't logic prevailed? Don't know if there is an answer for that, but
Money.
yeah. Are you answering the question, or are you?
I could take a stab at it. I'm Anne-Marie Lambert. I'll be with the poets on May 4th.
Oh, okay.
Leading the walk. And I'm a board of the Belmont Citizens Forum. I think it's all about money and politics. I think that Belmont is not going to make a cent off of this data. I can't find a person in Belmont who's in favor of developing and not in favor of preserving the forest.
Really?
Just to correct the record.
Well, that's
There's been a shift in our Belmont Board of Selectmen, and they're all in favor of finding a way, but it's a challenge because of the money and the politics, because the owner by right can develop the forest, as Quentin was explaining. I think some of the letter writing, sure, we can support legislators, but they are challenged, as including Will, who has tried. And I think letters to potential fundraising sources is a good move, because the fundraising sources who care about preserving the forest, if they had $13 million to spend, their current game plan is to spend it in the western part of the state because they can get more acres, and to explain why the value of this acreage is greater than the value per acre of land in the west. They need to hear about it on their Twitter accounts, in my opinion. And why our DEP is fighting our Concom is beyond me, but it has to do with their interpretation of the subtle Wetlands Protection Act specifics. And I think that in terms of an update on the legal appeal on March 19th, the Conservation Commission, in combination with the town of Belmont, did terminate their appeal. That was the second case. Now there's only one case pending, which is the one with the coalition, which is going to be finalized one way or the other at some point at the judge's discretion. So that is the pressure of the end game that Quentin talked about. But from a Belmont perspective, why has this not moved forward? We don't have the money. Even our CPA is restricted right now because we don't want to leverage it. We want to go to a town vote if we're going to do any kind of large leveraged investment, and we have to balance that against other town priorities. So it's a complicated thing. Definitely get out there and experience for yourself this weekend. But it's not easy. It's really a complicated, as you can see, situation. And Belmont needs help. Our selectmen need support, not antagonism. They don't, what is the next step? It's not obvious. It's not obvious other than finding some kind of source of 13, 15, whatever number of dollars. Once we have a willing seller, we don't know if and when we're going to have a willing seller. It's tough. It's very tough.
Thank you.
Question for because I found that Cambridge has these, has forbidden a permanent dewatering of soil, okay? Because that area is really problematic. I mean, it's not only a floodplain area, but also the soil is extremely difficult. They do have to use piles as foundation. There is no way around that. But Belmont, does Belmont also have a permanent, forbidden permanent dewatering or not? This is a question.
Does Belmont forbid what?
Permanent dewatering of the soil.
You
cannot have a pump in the basement and pump out all the water all the time. They will have to do that.
Well, they have persuaded the DEP that they won't have to do that. Part of the court case that is submission of evidence at the request of our building inspector, who is evaluating their application, submission of evidence of the large amounts of clay that are underneath that part where he's building, so that the infiltration basins that he is proposing don't have soil, they have clay, which won't absorb the water.
But he's a sensitive clay. He's going to collapse
I'm
actually.
telling
He's
you, the
tremendous.
people
He's
who own-
150 feet.
The people who own the answer to that question, namely the DEP, disagree. They are persuaded by the engineers from the developer who have put the numbers together, and testimony from Scott Worsley, who spoke today, and testimony from the town, has not persuaded the DEP, has not persuaded the judges, and so the case has failed in that aspect. We can, you would think engineering is objective, but as this gentleman was saying earlier, there's lots of interpretation, there's, that's the way it has gone. Whether it will go that way with the second case in the end, none of us can say, so the judges will.
So we're running a little short on time.
I just wanted to say that a major issue that came up at the very end of the Belmont Conservation Commission's case was the soils. They discovered the soils testing that they hadn't had before during the case, and they wanted to continue the appeal before the selectmen pulled the rug out there from under the. But the soils and the clay layer was an issue that they tried to bring before the Attorney General's office.
There are still rules that are part of the building permit process, and so we're going to continue to be diligent about monitoring those rules and regulations. But it's discouraging that based on the wetlands protection stormwater regulations that the authorities in charge of that are not.
So I want to wrap up with one final question so that we can keep the energy going and move across the room to do a little more in-depth discussion about what we can actually do. One thing we haven't mentioned at all is whether Arlington has been involved. So one person asked if Arlington is helping at all with this situation. No one has mentioned Arlington yet, so I don't know if anyone from the panel knows the situation with Arlington.
They've written letters, and in 2002, both Belmont and Arlington voted to preserve this silver maple forest. It was a very quiet vote, but they voted, and you can't get up to it. But they finally did. It was admitted, Arlington admitted it very openly and honestly not too long ago, that they actually voted to preserve it. So they've written letters asking Belmont to continue to appeal. So this has gone on in a fairly lighthearted, not a forceful way. So now we need to get all these things back up.
Yeah. You wanted to add something too?
Yeah, Arlington has its own nature preserve the other side of the highway that is private land that could be developed on our property, so that's where their energy is focused. You can see it on this map. They're very concerned about traffic and wrote a letter as part of the 40B process to our selectmen about that. I don't know who's denying the Belmont voted on it. Yeah, Belmont voted on it also. And they're very concerned about that rink site that looks like a traffic island on the highway, just north of Wolf Pond. That used to be an ice skating rink. At the time, it was owned by DCR. It's still owned by DCR. DCR is now let the highway department use it. They're teaching vehicles there, and I'm trying to get that to be turned back to forest. It's challenging. But Belmont cares a lot about this. Belmont is looking at stormwater regulations at our town meeting, this annual town meeting next week, for instance. And so there's a lot of interest in this general issue.
All right, well, thank you.
Say those, it's a 40B project, so any local things that you pass can be overridden by the process. So you need to get enough people out there putting the pressure to say that whatever methods you can, hold things up, look for rules that could say we can't go yet, so that we can try to bring up enough people who support this, and it's got to be wide, and maybe you can find enough of those people. But it's an expensive piece of property, which is why you can't just go out and make it easy, oh, we'll purchase this little park. They managed to make a lot of profit on the property already, and so they have a lot of funds in store to fight. So it takes effort from people to inspire other people to get enough sway within the circles.
That's all true, but I think right now we need pressure on people who have big funds, whether they're private or public. If we don't have the money lined up, then
That's what you need to have. You need to spread out to find those people and stall until we get enough of those people.
That's right.
Okay, so let's start talking about what we can do. I hope everyone has been energized now, so please, we'll move over to the room next, across the hall, 2-048. It has a bunch of tables. It's good for discussion. Feel free to grab some more food on your way out. We have lots more here. And a reminder, if you haven't filled out your postcard yet, please fill out that postcard, sign it, and put it in the box at the table where you grabbed your program.